It's Joe Pardavila. This is the Forbes Books podcast, and the home fitness industry exploded during the pandemic, with gyms and studios around the globe shut down due to COVID restrictions. But now that all of those restrictions have been lifted and more people return to their yoga and spin classes, what does the present and future look like for the virtual fitness industry? My guest this week is Nathanial Jewell. Nate is a former Apple and GE Exec who is the founder of Recess, a virtual fitness platform for instructors who want to grow their business online and off. Hey, Nate, how are you?
I'm doing well, Joe. Thanks for having me today.
So I want to start the conversation by talking about this. So I've spoken to one other person who went from working at Apple, I think they worked in the training program there, to becoming an entrepreneur and doing their own thing. And my question here is, I feel like for a lot of people, if you get into Apple early, you've peaked too early. Did you worry about that in your life where you're like, oh man, it's never going to get better than this? What was your mindset getting into Apple, then leaving it?
No, actually, I probably had the complete opposite mindset when I got into Apple. I was almost like, oh, did I get in too late? At that point, it was 2014. So that's, a long time ago when you think about all they've done since then. But, the iPhone had been around a while, the iPad, you're like, oh man, is it too late? Are they peaking? Like, did I miss the ride? And then I was there for a few years, and we launched the Apple Watch and a few other things. So it's like, oh no, I didn't. So I never felt like it. I peaked kind of in the high school aspect of it. It was almost like I was too late. And then being there, it was great. It's an amazing place to learn a lot about on the customer side of things and the product. Given my background, those things are experiences I hadn't had, and Apple really teaches you a lot about putting the customer first and the customer journey and surprise and delight, and just how much to really care about every minute detail of the product.
And I don't want to make this all about Apple, but I'm just curious, what prepared you for a role there? And again, you played a big part, especially in the launch of the Apple Watch. But what kind of jobs or schooling prepared you to get there too late, according to you?
Yeah, I would say a combination of really all of it. But in many ways, I also don't think I was prepared when I got to Apple, which I'll explain. But my background, I was at GE, so great big company. Learned a lot about being in a big company. Is a good grooming ground, an amazing training program that I went through there. So a lot of foundational skills that I still leverage to this day from GE. And then Deloitte, consulting firm, and also had a really great training program. So you continue to learn. And Deloitte just gave me a ton of breadth of experience, a little bit of depth here and there, but really breadth and a lot of operating experience. So I kind of went from getting something really deep technically at GE to a lot of breadth at Deloitte. So I'd say those two. And then on top of it, I got my MBA at Wharton. And really that was just meeting a lot of people from a lot of different places, kind of just, increasing my diversity of thought as I approach different subjects. And going into Apple, all of that was great, but I'd also spent my entire career and most of my life on the East Coast in the Northeast, which is very different from California, culture-wise, mentality-wise, all these things. And then going from more old school blue chip companies to Apple, tech, even though I've been around a while, it's still tech, it's Silicon Valley, completely different way of just living life, doing things, business. And it took me probably 12 months to really get my feet under me.
Wow.
There. It was hard. To just adapt, at that point, kind of assimilate to doing things maybe, I wouldn't say slowly, but maybe more passively than the rough, direct Northeast, Boston, New York City style of what Deloitte and GE kind of were. But also taught you to be a lot more collaborative, I think, too. And how do you influence without authority? Which was really, really something big at Apple, because it's a very matrixed organization, and you may not have the authority to get something done, but you're tasked to get it done. So how do you influence everyone else? Where I'd come from two companies where authority and influence kind of went hand in hand. So a lot of prep on the skill set and my ability to kind of adapt and all that from consulting and GE, but I learned a lot at Apple. It honed in on my weaknesses so I could really sharpen those. So it was quite the experience.
Wow, it's funny. I've never heard that before, and I guess I figure when people walk into Apple as an outsider, you think, oh, you get brainwashed the second you walk in the door, and you follow. But I guess it makes sense. We're humans, and especially you came from years of working at Deloitte and GE, and the fact that you had a set way of doing things. Why do you think it took you 12 months? Was it because You were stubborn? Was it just hard for you to? I mean, I jokingly say that, but is it just something you just had trouble wrapping your arms around?
Yeah, no, it was both. I mean, I don't how old was I? I was early 30s, so 30 years of growing up in a certain culture. I never lived on the West Coast. I don't even think I really traveled to the West Coast much. And it's just different. I now identify more with the West Coast than I do the Northeast, probably at this point in life. But it was hard to get my arms around just because I'd spent so much time in these other environments, and I was really stubborn. I was like, well, this is the way I learned, so this is the right way to do things.
Hmm.
And I had some really good managers that kind of just hit me on the head. It's like, no, there are other ways to do things, and there's the Apple way, and you're at Apple, so we're going to do things the Apple way. And what I really learned at Apple, which was just different culturally from my other companies, you're in meetings, you can speak up, ask questions. Apple, you can do that, but what they encourage you to do is sit back and listen and absorb it. And
Hmm.
while they do things their way and it may not make sense to you at first as an outsider, there's probably a reason. So listen, then do one-on-ones with people and ask, well, why are we doing it this way? So seek to understand versus coming in saying, I have these experiences. I've seen this happen this way before, so this is the right answer. And there's definitely a method to the madness. So it was definitely stubborn. It was, being young, again, like early 30s, I was still a little probably, ego, a little overconfident. But I think Apple really helped put all that in check and taught me to slow down, to be more open-minded, to influence, and to just learn along the way. So it was hard. It was very, very hard transition for me. But looking back, I learned and grew so much from it as well.
So it almost sounds like you have multiple MBAs now because it sounded like an MBA program there at Apple in
Yes,
Cupertino.
absolutely, absolutely was. And even with that, I still, it was a great experience. I did well there. I was able to overcome all of it. But it was probably one of the toughest learning experiences in my professional career.
Wow. And lastly, let's go out on a high note with your Apple conversation. Talk to me about the impact you had there because, like you said, it took a while to keep things moving. It's like Sisyphus rolling the ball up the hill, but you had a huge impact overseeing a lot of multiple things. What's one of the things you're most proud of there?
Well, part of the huge impact was luck. I think with anything, when I got there, like my skip level manager left within pretty quickly, and shortly thereafter, my manager left. So you just kind of all of a sudden just get more responsibility.
Hmm.
So sometimes right time, right place. And probably the biggest thing I worked on, most proud of, would be the launch of the Apple Watch. Now, that took the entire company to launch, and I was a very, very small piece of that, as were my team, but. I worked what was in the channel business, worldwide sales controller, and overseeing and helping work through all the different retailers around the world that would sell the watch. And then also on the back end, we were working with Nike, so that Nike would be part of the watch from an app and then special Nike bands. And I had the opportunity to work on that deal with Nike, got to go to the Nike campus. And that was just a really awesome experience. And then I also had the opportunity when we launched Watch to be in an Apple store on the launch day and everything. And it was a really exciting time. There's a lot that went into that from the entire company, the timeline, the work, the hours, everything. And it was just a huge moment. And I learned so much from that. Even though it's a huge company, there was an entrepreneurial aspect to it of, being someone that helped bring a product to market, even, in what capacity I did that. And you just learn so much that goes into it. And I think that, coupled with so many of my other experiences, really started to lay the foundation for me to go on and do my own thing eventually.
I want to ask you one more thing about GE, though. GE, I think, and it's going to sound like a funny statement, they're like the most underrated company in America, maybe in the planet. They're almost like taken for granted. Do you agree with that? Like the fact that they're so omnipresent, they still play such a big part in our life, but they're not like a sexy company like a Google or an Apple, yet they're worth billions and billions of dollars.
Yeah, they used to be a sexy company in the 90s. I think when like infrastructure and manufacturing and all that was still more present, in terms of what the big companies were. And then the dot-com bubble and everything in the early 2000s, and GE went in the path of building a big financial arm. And then they got slaughtered in '08, '09, '10. I actually just listened to a podcast with Jeff Immelt the other day, where he was talking about it because he came into a very turbulent time. He became CEO a few days before 9/11. And then
Wow.
from 9/11, he dealt with that, tragedy and the fallout, to a few years later, you have Bear Stearns and everybody else in the big financial arm. So I think they went through a huge shakeup and having to really change the business. And it stayed fairly unsexy,
Hmm.
in the sense that they aren't Apple and Google and Amazon, all these services, but they to your point, they are a huge company and they do a lot of things that power our everyday lives. When I worked at GE Plastics, it was something like you couldn't go a day and like, or multiple times a day where you weren't touching GE plastic, like in your everyday life. But you just didn't know because it's not branded GE plastic. And
Right.
that's still true today. I mean, my fridge is a GE fridge and the planes you fly on have GE engines. And when you go to a hospital, most of that equipment's probably GE. So they've just taken a kind of this conglomerate approach, and you're right, it's unsexy, it's different, and who knows how it's going to continue to evolve in the future. But they've definitely gotten really beat up, the past 5, 6, 7 years in the stock market from investors and whatnot. But they're still there. They're still trudging along and delivering things that we need in our lives.
And one thing I've always heard about GE is that they're big on their leadership programs, right? And I think you might have alluded to them
Yes.
later. Like they really want to people to rise from within because from what I've heard from Apple, and correct me if I'm wrong, they say for you to move up in Apple, you have to go leave and come back. Whereas GE wants people to rise the ranks. Tell me about that.
Yeah, but both of those to me are spot on. So when I was at GE, one of the things that appealed to me about going to GE was if you worked your butt off, you could be CEO of a business, and if you're really good and really lucky, because luck definitely plays into timing, you could be CEO of GE.
Hmm.
And so I went in and I was like, there was a path. It's like, I was in the financial management program. You do that for 2 years. You can graduate off that, go into another program. And when you looked at all the leadership, it was like, X percent, it was like over 70% had come from this leadership program or that leadership program. If you just put yourself in these opportunities, it's not like it was a foregone conclusion, but you're really setting yourself up for success that you'll probably be a CEO or CFO of one of the business units. And when I was there and for many years after, like 100%, they just want to promote from within. It was very rare that they brought in an outside executive. I think they've done that a little bit more now to shake some things up from as I still follow them. When I went to, one of the, I think, challenging things for me in going to Apple, actually, Deloitte was also similar to GE. They very much promoted within. So, similar
Hmm.
mentality. When I went to Apple, you're right. I was very awestruck by that, or awestruck's the wrong word, but like my eyes were open to, wait a minute, they're bringing in these executives from outside. Well, what about the internal advancement? And it was a different way of doing things. That you didn't see quite as much of the promotions happening within. You saw a lot more external hires. Now, I will say, since I've left, there have been some internal promotions as I continue to follow it of some VPs and SVPs as that started to happen. But they definitely took the approach of let's bring in diversity of thought, let's bring in outsiders with different experiences. Some of them were successful, some of them crashed and burned really hard. So yeah, very different. But that was different for me. It took me a while to grasp that and to accept that, given my background.
Hmm. And your background, it almost sounds like you were very much what they call an entrepreneur, having an entrepreneurial mindset within a company, whether it's GE, Deloitte, Apple. Then one day, Nathanial Jewell says, I want to become an entrepreneur. I want to make that I into an E. So, what was it about Recess that was the one thing that would make you an entrepreneur?
I think that yeah, you're right. I was an entrepreneur. That spirit has always been there. I left Apple and worked at two other startups. So being at a very small stage company, I started to get more into the thick of it. And I was like, one day I might do my own thing. But I honestly, it wasn't until I did that I really thought I would. And it was pre-Recess. Recess was a pivot from another company. It was this business called Drift. And it was a physical fitness studio. It was on wheels. So it was kind of this big, crazy thing. And we launched it in August of 2019. And I'd always been super passionate about fitness. And I was at one of the startups and I was like, if I were to ever do my own thing, what would I do? And what am I really passionate about? And it's fitness, it's health and wellness. And what could I do within that space? So we launched Drift, as I said, August 2019. And then 7 months later, March 2020 or whatever that is, COVID happens. So a
I'm
physical
familiar.
studio,
Yeah, I've heard it.
yeah,
I've heard it.
a physical studio doesn't work. So we had to shut down. And we did the Zoom thing like everybody else, of course. And in doing the Zoom thing, we opened up our platform booking management software. And we said, if there's any instructor in the world that just needs a place to list their classes, we'll do it for you. And we had people reach out, probably like 100 instructors from across the world reach out. And we weren't making money off it or anything. We're like, that's kind of interesting. And we were waiting, and around mid-April, end of April, a really popular studio in the US called Barry's
Mhm.
also started doing Zoom. And we said, wow, if Barry's is doing Zoom, there really probably isn't any tech out there for fitness on the video side. And then we also know there's no tech out there for fitness on the tooling side for these independent instructors. Maybe we can go build something. And we toyed around with the idea a little bit in May and June, and we said, yep, we can go build something. We think we can do a pretty good job at it. So we raised a little bit of money over the summer, and we shut down Drift, and we launched Recess unintentionally. Actually, I realized it like 2 days ahead of time, but we launched Recess on the 1 year anniversary of launching Drift. Yeah,
That's a
there was,
quick
there was, there
turnaround.
was it was a really quick turnaround. It was literally like 2 days before. I'm like, wait a minute, this day sounds familiar. And I looked up like, oh shit, we launched Drift last year. Okay, great. And Recess has been phenomenal. When we launched it, we did it in a way we said we're gonna kind of go slow. And we had a wait list for instructors to use the platform. And we did it because we wanted to, one, make sure people coming on, we had the time to onboard them and make sure they were successful. We also just really wanted to learn what features worked for them, what features were missing. Like, how did we just make sure we're going to build the right product? And then over the next year, we did that. We did a lot of learning and we kind of took our time. And the industry was, this wasn't rocket science or genius ideas. So there was 100+ competitors really a year ago. And then October 2021, we started to blow up the product. We started to rebuild from scratch. And we actually just launched that rebuild yesterday, May 16th. And it's been phenomenal. So it was a lot of learning, taking our time, and that's a little bit of the genesis, I guess, of Recess. But it all came down to just my love for health and wellness and fitness, and then coupled with my want and desire to just help these creators and these fit pros find a place to run and launch their businesses.
So are you a B2B or B2C? Because I know you've talked about consumers, but it sounds like you're a B2B.
We're a little bit of everything.
Okay.
So we're B2B in that we have a product that's for independent fit pro and studios to run their businesses. So everything they need to run their business. We also have a B2C product, which is recess.tv, where a consumer can come in and we help them find their workout. So we ask
Ah,
them some questions, we match them with that instructor or with that studio. And we're like, we know that you're going to want somebody. Some people want to jump around and try a lot of things, but most people want to find one kind of community, one instructor community, one studio community. So we try to match them. So on the B2B side, recess.tv is really a lead gen service for them. It's really a matchmaking service. And on the
hmm.
consumer side, it's a place that has everything you could possibly want. We're building the most inclusive and accessible platform. So if you want hip hop yoga or jazz hit class, whatever it is, there's probably a combination of what you want on the platform because we've built it that way where we try to bring in all kinds of modalities, all kinds of styles, all kinds of people to be creators on the platform so that no matter what you're looking for as a consumer, it's there. And then there's also the element of for the B2B, we're B2B2C because they're delivering to clients and they're helping clients. So what's that experience? So we're kind of touching on three different business
Hmm.
models there.
Interesting. And when you say you do everything for these instructors, I guess without getting too deep in the weeds, what does that mean, everything for these instructors?
So all of if anything they need to do to run their business from bookings, scheduling, managing their payments, all their marketing emails, all the transactional
Okay.
emails, their websites, just everything on the tech side that they need to do. Plus, we have an educational program. So we do educational events around how to grow your business, how to do social, how to engage clients, how to increase your revenue from clients, those types of things. So it's really we have built what we believe is the most vertically integrated experience for instructors. And then at the same time, we're building what we believe to be the most curated, personalized experience for consumers when they come onto the platform. So really hitting it on both sides, which by bringing both those together in kind of unique ways that are targeted at both audiences, we think then the middle ends up being just a really powerful experience for everybody.
It almost sounds like you're describing like a fitness HubSpot, right? Where you offer all
HubSpot,
the.
I haven't heard that analogy, but yeah, sure. I mean, yeah,
I
I
mean,
think
you look
there's
at
that
all the things that
element.
HubSpot does for small
Yeah,
businesses. It's essentially what
yeah.
you're doing, except you're doing it for fitness people.
That's right. And if only HubSpot also helped you find clients and everything else, then you could add that on top of it. But yeah, there's analogies of what we do to HubSpot or Salesforce, kind of similar. There's
Yeah.
analogies of what we do to an Airbnb or Etsy, but we don't call ourselves a marketplace in that sense because it's much more about the connections and the matchmaking. But there's definitely lots of elements from these other industries that we've pulled on because there's millions of successful companies out there that have done similar things that we've done. So how do we pull what they've done that's been successful, but then do our own twist on it? Because health and wellness is different. It's
Hmm.
different than these other industries. And how do we kind of take that and apply it to our industry?
Interesting. All right, now you have to tell me if this is a right or wrong thing, but many articles have been written that the at-home fitness bubble is bursting. From someone who's basically built a whole company on the at-home fitness industry, are these reports of their demise greatly exaggerated? What are you seeing as now the future of at-home workouts?
Is the bubble bursting? In one sense? Absolutely. I mean, we weren't going to be locked in our homes for COVID for the rest of our lives. So the idea that you would never leave your home again was silly. And I think some companies maybe got ahead of themselves thinking that people were going to only order DoorDash for every single meal a day and
Right.
only work out in their home for the rest of their lives and only it just that wasn't sustainable. So in that sense, sure, it bursted, but it didn't, in the sense that COVID accelerated the idea that people can work out anywhere. So we built an online at home fitness company for the first part of COVID because that's how the world operated. But that was never the end goal. The end goal and where we are now is we built an omni-channel experience for those creators and for the consumer. So if you're a creator and you have a physical studio, we power that business. We power that physical studio for you, but you might also teach virtual classes, and we power those for you. You might have on-demand content, and we can do all that for you as well. And if you're a consumer and you're like, you know what, today I want to find a workout in New York City, great. And then tomorrow I'm on the road traveling in Austin, I want to do a virtual workout with that same gym, great. So it changed the way people operate. And the latest study I read, well, 2 years ago, June of 2020, the beginning of COVID, 80+% of people said that they will continue to work out at home. And today, 60% of
Hmm.
people say they will continue to work out at home or in a hybrid omni-channel. And that is actually pretty impressive. It hasn't dropped more than that. And I think that shows that COVID accelerated people changing the way they live their lives. And that's going to continue to evolve. And it's different getting people who are, let's say, 50 plus or 40 plus or even 30 plus to fundamentally change their lives, but you got them to adjust their lives. And then people who are 10, 12, 16, 18, 20, well, they might approach health and wellness very differently as they start to get older and start to work
Right.
because they've been doing a lot more online, and they might be 90% doing things remotely or virtually. So has the bubble burst? It burst in the sense that yes, COVID wasn't sustainable, but it actually hasn't burst because in the next 5, 10 years, the health and wellness industry is going to quadruple. I mean, right now it's a $5 trillion industry. I could see in 10 years it's a $20 trillion industry, and it's going to be an omni-channel industry.
Huh. And you're going to want a little small piece of that 20 trillion, right?
Just a small piece of that. That's all.
You're not greedy, right? You don't need all of it.
That's right.
um, one of the things I remember from working out, I was one of those idiots that did CrossFit and been to have held many gym memberships, was the community aspect of it. Like when you go into the gym that same time every day, you're going to see the same faces all the time, and there's camaraderie and stuff. I know that the home fitness tech space promotes community, and I know that's a big part of what Recess does. I think on the homepage it says "Find your fitness community." How can you duplicate that sort of? I guess duplicate may be a tough word, but how do you assimilate that sort of same community that you get from seeing the same people every day at the gym or a fitness class that you do in one of these online communities?
It's really hard. We are definitely working on it, and the way we approach it is twofold. One is there's a tech element. So how do we build the tools and features to enable the community to happen? But then the second piece is there's a human element. So you need the creators, the instructors, the studios to use those tools and features to build and engage their communities. So in that new update, I mentioned that we launched a really brand new product. So we call it the 2.0-2.0 that we launched yesterday. We launched this huge communication center feature, which is unlike anything that exists in the industry. And it's all about putting better tech in place so that the studios and instructors can create communities and engagement, and it lets them engage their communities, chat with them, omni-channel chat, if it's email, if it's text, whatever it is. You can create accountability groups. So if let's say you're doing a challenge, a 6-week challenge, and you have 50 clients, you could pair them up into groups of two so that they're holding each other accountable. And through all these things, the tooling and the features and how the creators end up using them is going to be really cool, and we'll build more on top of it. And then with their own personalities coming to life and engaging their communities, what we see is that clients end up getting together in real life and going to brunch or going and getting drinks. So you can do it. It's very hard because you have multiple components. You have the tech component and you have the human component, but you need those two to work in harmony. And that's the hard thing. But we're figuring it out and it's working really well right now in the early days. And I'm really excited about just where that's going to go on the community side.
Is that the hardest part of everything you're doing? Because it sounds like you said you're doing a lot of things for a lot of different customers. Is that one of the toughest, or is there something else that's equally as tough as Recess has progressed over the last year or so?
Yeah, it's the community is definitely one of the toughest ones. I'd say that it falls under this broad bucket of how do you create a platform? How do you create the tools that keep people coming back? But you really need two people to come back. You need a creator and a consumer. So we view ourselves as like, this middle thing. So how are we creating the tools that let the creators innovate and do cool new things that engage their clients? And then how do you create the same tools that to get the clients excited? They want to log in every day. I mean, this isn't an Instagram where you're sitting, 3 hours scrolling on it, engaged. You're coming in for a 30-minute workout, maybe 4 days a week, maybe not even 7 days a week. But how do you still log in on those off days? You're checking your streak, you're seeing your points, things that we kind of have in the pipeline. So there's this element of just engagement, I would say, and community is a huge sticky piece of that engagement. So if we approach everything from like just how do we get people healthier, happier, and more engaged, then all the people, it kind of actually makes the problem a little simpler because as we develop things, are we answering that umbrella question there?
I want to talk to you about Peloton because my brother's one of these Peloton crazies who, he owns pretty much every piece of clothing is Peloton branded. He owned the treadmill for a little while, and he's been using the bike for years. And they've done this amazing job of building the aforementioned community. We did I know you've been in the New York City area, but this is before the pandemic. They have their studio in on 14th Street, where people could go in for free Peloton classes, so then they could broadcast that class to the people all over the globe for Peloton. And so we did the class, and it was fun. And my brother said, how would you like it? I'm like, oh, it was pretty cool. And as we were leaving, there was a line like right by one of the Peloton signs, and I was like, what's that? I'm like, oh, those are all the students lining up to take pictures with the instructor. And I almost fell over. I'm like, huh? How did Peloton pull this off? I know you're not related to Peloton or work with them, but you're in this fitness industry. How are they able to build this hardcore community that includes my brother and make celebrities out of their instructors? As an outsider, what did you see that I don't see?
Well, I actually am not going to give the credit to Peloton. I'm going to give the credit to SoulCycle. Because Peloton actually got a couple of high-profile SoulCycle instructors when they first launched, and SoulCycle was the first really boutique studio that kind of took the nation by storm and created this cult following. And the instructors are the performers. They're the reason people go to these classes. Yes, there's the element of the brand, but it's the instructor. And at SoulCycle, it was really big in the early days. You take a picture with the instructor in front of the Soul sign. And then when Barry's open, same thing. You're always taking pictures with the instructors after class in front of the Barry sign and posting on Instagram. So when Peloton launched, that there's already this element of these instructors are awesome people. They're people that you love working out with. They're making an impact on your life because you're working out. You follow them on Instagram, like they're kind of this like celebrity to you. If you're following them on Instagram, so you get a picture with them, you get to post that picture with you and your favorite instructor on Instagram. So I actually say it's a little bit less about Peloton. It's more about the individual. Now Peloton was very smart and they saw what SoulCycle had done and how important the instructors were. And they poached those instructors from these other brands. And they realized that the instructors are they are the secret sauce to the business being successful. And the same thing's true at Recess. I mean, the creators, the studios, they are the secret sauce to any of this working. Without them, there is no business here. So I think Peloton was super smart and then they realized that and they figured out how to capitalize on that for their business.
Yeah, it's still crazy to me. As someone who, I like going to the gym, but to think of like, I think even one of the Peloton instructors ended up on Dancing with the Stars, which is like, again, it's not like George Clooney's on Dancing with the Stars, but you have to be some level of celebrity to show up on that show. So it's crazy. And I want to talk about your leadership journey here. Now, we joked about the fact that you turned the entrepreneur into an entrepreneur and after you left Apple, did a couple startups and now running Recess. How are you as a leader of your own company. Do you feel like it all led to this, like an action movie? It's all come down to this. Is all of that time you spent in those incredible companies is prepared you for this? How are you as a leader?
I can always do better. My life motto and philosophy is continuous improvement. I always want to do better today than I did yesterday. So learn from mistakes, learn from experiences. So everything I did at Apple, GE, Deloitte, those startups absolutely prepared me in many ways because I had some leadership roles for running my own company. But then once you're in it and you're running it, you're getting these new experiences that you didn't have. Building a company is very hard in its own right. How do you hire the right people? When you're really small, where we're 22 people, but when we were 2 people, 3 people, 4 people, each hire has a outsized impact on the culture you're going to build. So how are you building culture? How are you engaging with the team? How are you making sure everyone feels heard? What are your core values? How important is transparency and accountability and all these things? And it's hard. And I try not to make the same mistake twice when it comes to leading and leading the team and hearing the team and building a culture. Every once in a while you do, and you need to hear it a couple of times. But I constantly seek feedback. I'm always asking the other leadership team members and other people on team. I do one-on-ones with the whole team. What can I do better? What's the 360? And I'll say one of the things that we've done a great job, or two things that we've done a great job at, and it's I think just been luck and hiring the right people is one, there is no ego at our company. It's probably the thing we hear the most from new people that join us or people that interview. They're like, "Wow, no one has an ego. Like, how did you do that?" I have no idea, but it's been amazing because it allows freedom of thought. And the second thing is, by and large, everyone has no problem, pushing back and giving me feedback directly, which I love and I appreciate that. I would never want to build a company of a bunch of yes people. I think you can really get in trouble. Like you can, if you're really good and smart, maybe you can succeed that way as a leader, but you can also get in a lot of trouble. So for me, it's hard. Every day is a challenge. Managing people is hard. Building a culture is hard, but it's constantly listening and constantly wanting to do better and improve is kind of how I approach it.
I could speak to the ego piece because before we started recording, I had to ask you what your position was because I know you own the company, but I was like, "What is your job there? Are you like the janitor? What's your title?" But you were nice enough to let me know that you're the founder or CEO. So I'm glad that ego is not a big piece there. And why do you think that is? Like, do you think that happened? I mean, I know the word intentional gets thrown around a lot these days, but was that super intentional, or do you think that just happened unintentionally?
I think it was intentional in a roundabout way in that the values we put in place early and how we talk to the team, we were very intentional with that. We were intentional to create openness. We were intentional to create diversity of thought, to make sure everyone was heard, that there was, always positivity. One of our values is lead with kindness. And
Hmm.
I think that kind of speaks, against ego almost. Like if you're leading with kindness, how could you have an ego? So we did things very intentionally, but it was never about not having ego, but all of that added up to not having ego. So it was unintentional, but it was intentional in how we operated.
Interesting. And why was that so important?
I think my background and experiences of different people I've worked with, I've seen some amazing managers I wanted to pull from. And I've, like everyone, you work for some people, you're like, I just never want to have that kind of culture. And I really fundamentally believe that the sum of the parts is bigger than the whole.
Hmm.
So if we can have everyone contributing and everyone working hard and everyone having, the thought and being able to participate and feeling they're heard and being able to add value to the company, 1 plus 1 is going to be 10. Versus if you only had a few people who were decision makers and just everything was their way or the highway, 1 plus 1 is probably zero.
Hmm.
And I believe that from the very beginning. I wanted everyone to be involved. I wanted that because I know I don't know all the answers. I'm not going to be the smartest person in the room. I'm going to have conviction on certain things. I'm going to have the vision, but the details how we get there, it's going to change, and we're going to kind of adjust along the way and go back and forth. And you need the whole team believing in the vision, but then also knowing they have a voice and power to impact that.
Hmm. And circling back to the kindness comment you made, you tweeted on May 16th, "I respond to every cold email, even though 99% of the time I decline them." And I wanted to ask you about this, and there was more to the tweet, but I want to dig in a little bit here because we live in this world where it's perfectly acceptable to ignore an email. I
Yes.
don't know if it's right or wrong. It is what it is. You never get offended if someone doesn't respond to email because we've grown up in this world where basically They can ignore it, or they can do my favorite, the equivalent to the dog ate my homework is your email ended up in spam. So why is it important for you to respond to to all of those cold emails?
And there are definitely a lot. Part of it, I think, is just it's a lead with kindness, treating people with respect. It's follow through has always been big, although that may not. To me, it's connected. It may
Yeah.
not be as obvious, but
Mhm.
you have these BDRs. They're young in their careers, and I've done the cold outreach, and it is thankless. I mean, back when you had a call and stuff, people just hang up on you. They swear at you. And these people are just they're trying to earn a living. They're trying to move up. They're trying to do well, and when you get the feeling of getting a reply, even if it's a no, you're like, wow, they actually replied to me.
Mm.
I get thank yous all the time when they're like, hey, thanks for replying, because they don't get the replies. The replies they do get that are no's aren't that friendly. And at the same time, like I send cold emails, and so I know what it's like, and my team sends cold emails, and I just think it goes back to human decency. It's like treat others, with respect and kindness, and I think that goes a really long way. So that's why again, 99% of the time it's usually a no, because you're kind of set in whatever you're doing, the service you have, the software you have. But every once in a while, the no turns into a conversation. It might still be a no, but you learn something from it. So yeah, I reply to every email unless it's straight up spam, unless it's a bot. But I
Right.
reply to every single email, and I'll always do that. It's just something I personally believe in.
Why do you think, for lack of a better word, we're dicks and feel like it's okay to ignore email? Like, why do you think that is? I'm just curious. I mean, you've worked in the aforementioned pretty big companies, and I'm sure there were many people in those companies that ignored emails as well, and they turned out pretty well. But it's perfectly acceptable to just ignore people.
Yeah, I think it's actually just human nature. I mean, my when I was younger, probably my default was to maybe just ignore, or be like, "Hey, leave me alone," or whatever it is. But we're a society, and we need to work together on lots of things. And if we don't do things that I think are kind and respectful, we end up in really bad situations with how we treat each other, which is what you can see playing out in the world today, and that how we don't treat many people with respect. And I just think that a lot of times humans are self-absorbed, and they only care about themselves and what's best for themselves, which probably goes back to, who knows, some type of evolution there. But it does take effort. I mean, the classic example is when you're out, and I don't do this now, but back in the day when I was at Deloitte and GE and Apple, a new hire or an intern, I'd always take them to lunch or something out at a restaurant, and I just see, how are you treating the host, how are you treating the waiter, what is your demeanor, and you learn a lot by that. And people just treat people a lot of times horrendously, and if you're just nice and you say hi and thank you and please, it's amazing how far that goes.
Yeah.
Which is also kind of sad too, that goes so far, because it's not the expected behavior. So yeah, I'm not a psychologist, so I don't know the exact reasons, but I do think there's some unfortunate evolution there, and human behavior, and it takes work, and hopefully over the next many decades and millennia, we are all just naturally kind instead of naturally not kind.
Yeah, I mean, I always say it costs nothing to be nice. It really,
That's
I
right.
mean, I drive my wife crazy because sometimes when we walk in the neighborhood and I'll say hi to someone, and if they don't respond back, I'll say hi again. Just because, give me a hi back. That's all you can.
Exactly.
It costs you nothing to give me that hi back. I'm not asking you to hit me up in Venmo. Just hi back. Oh, so funny. So Nate, you like being a boss, huh? You like it. It seems like you've taken to it.
Do I like being? No,
Oh, I'm sorry. I
no.
apologize. Wait a minute. I know you don't like being called a boss, but
Yeah, I was gonna say it's not how I
I
view
almost
myself
tricked
at
you into
all.
answering that. All right, let me rephrase that. Do you like running your own company?
Yes, I like being a founder, just because I just love what we're building so much. I mean, it's everything I think about. So in that sense, absolutely, I love running my own company with my co-founder, with the whole team. I do believe we all run it together, but it's definitely different when you don't have anyone to report to. But it's actually, I think, harder too, because you have to hold yourself accountable a lot more. There isn't anyone else holding you accountable. You might have a board of directors and stuff, but they're not in the day to day. They're not in your Slacks. They're not in your emails. I do really much enjoy it, but you have to be really self-aware to make sure that that ego doesn't creep in, and that you're staying grounded and you're listening to the team. But yeah, no, I love being a founder, and I love everything we're doing at Recess.
His name is Nathanial Jewell, and don't tell anyone he's the CEO of Recess. Nathaniel, if folks want to find out more about the company, where would they go?
Recess.tv is our website, of course, if you want to sign up. We post a lot on LinkedIn, so you can follow us there from a business side. And of course, our Instagram, we recess. And then we're also on TikTok if you want some fun videos.
Awesome. Nate, thank you very much for the time, man. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Joe. I appreciate it.
And that's it for this episode of the Forbes Books Podcast. If you enjoy the show, make sure you take a quick second to subscribe so you automatically get new shows when they drop. Also, if you have just 1 minute, I'd love if you left us a review so more amazing entrepreneurs like yourself can discover the show. And please, don't forget the golden rule and treat others as you want to be treated. Thanks for listening. Until next time, adios.